With teams going into 2024, upgrading their cars and making a whole new car for the upcoming year, Red Bull is a car that a lot of teams are going to base their design off of. Now we do know a couple of things and really the secret as to why the RB19 was so strong. But with recent articles coming out about how Aston Martin, Ferrari, Mercedes, and McLaren are all approaching their new car, there is another secret added to this Red Bull car that I want to talk about. Before getting into the video, please subscribe and like if you're new here. It would mean the world for me. Let's get into the Red Bull car. So as I said, these articles have came out with Aston Martin, McLaren, and Ferrari. And the teams that I really want to focus on is Aston Martin and Ferrari because they say specific things as to how they will upgrade their 2024 car to catch Red Bull. Obviously, that is the goal, to fight the championship. The team is ahead by a lot, but there are things that the Red Bull car is doing much differently to the other teams, and that is how they're winning so consistently on every single track. Because we did have tracks where Ferrari was the strongest. We did have tracks where Mercedes was strong, or Aston Martin. Now it all kind of makes sense as to why some cars have better traits and one car was good at it all. Now for Aston Martin, Tom McCullough talks in this article saying, which is the director over there, he says the basis on what they're doing for this car is to make the actual base model of the car better so it is good in every single position, or race really, to put it in a different way. In 2023, they weren't very focused on big upgrades, but bringing small parts to every single track to try and optimize the car. They already made their base, but they were using the front wing and the rear wing to optimize the car. This did not work. This is similar to the plan that Ferrari used in 22 and Mercedes. That did not work. Now in 22, Ferrari had a super strong car in high speed, medium speed, and it was pretty strong in low speed too, but it was not a good straight line car. So they compromised the car in certain spots, had a straight line speed bullet, were good in high speed, but lacked in the medium speed cornering for the most part, and really in tracks that it was windy. Now, what was the issue with the Ferrari car? Well, the actual baseline of the car yet again wasn't set up correctly. Carlos Sainz points out the actual strengths to the car. He talks about the 90-degree angles, being able to go over curbs well, taking the straights well, and low speed corners. Everything that I kind of brought up. He says they have to use that and go into next year's car, really just making it considerably better. We do know that Ferrari is making a whole entire complete car. Talked about it in my last video, and I talked about Mercedes as well, going with a whole entire different concept change. We all know all these cars are going to go with that side pod design, with the downwash, and will they actually copy the suspension? Well, suspension is part of the trick with this car. With that pull rod suspension, that isn't really the magic. The main magic with the car is the geometry, shape of the suspension, but also being able to lower that car. They're able to lower it to a level that no other team can. I talked about it before with the whole entire W14 versus the RB19 plank wear. As you can see, the RB19 plank wear is across the whole entire plank, while the W14s is only on the ends, which really messes with the car because you know it's not going to the lower ride height that it needs to. In 2022, Mercedes practically had the lowest car on the straights, but the car in general was just kind of flawed from the upper side of the car. But in 23, Red Bull perfected it all. They were able to do this because the actual baseline of the car, which is what everybody is talking about, is giving them the full out downforce that they need. So upgrades in the year were super minimal because first of all, they had the penalty, but second of all, they didn't need to upgrade the actual front wings and the rear wings of the car. They brought in total 3 rear wings. They needed one for Monza, they needed one for Monaco, and they needed a medium downforce rear wing. That is it for Red Bull. On the front wing side, it was the same thing. And I'm talking about, yes, there were specs to the wings like gurney flaps, maybe changing up a couple of areas, but nothing significant. Why is this? Well, in this new regulation of downforce for 2022 with the ground effect era, the year before the regulations in 2021, the car was distributed 33, 33, 33. 33% downforce on the front wing, 33% downforce from the actual floor and really the side pods and everything else, and 33% on the rear wing. Obviously, these are numbers that are kind of just being distributed from the FIA to talk about how the regulations were set. In 22, they wanted to take out the dirty air in 2022, so by doing that, they put 25% downforce on the front wing, 50% downforce on the actual underfloor and middle of the car, and 25 on the rear wing. Well, what Red Bull is doing is they are making a significant amount of downforce go even more into the underfloor. I would practically say 15, 70%, 15, because they're able to distribute that air so well below the floor. Now, obviously the underfloor makes up most of the downforce, but the actual car itself is also riding at a height that is so low because of the suspension that their actual baseline downforce is just coming from the car being low enough that they can ride it onto every single track in both high speed, low speed, and medium speed. The only significant upgrade they had was the side pod design, and what they did was make the side pods go out a little bit wider, maybe causing a little bit more of actual good drag to be able to have the car slow down in those lower speed corners. They did have a couple more upgrades, but the significant one was the side pod with another little winglet to give it even more downforce. But as I said, the baseline of this car was set to a low level. The reason why Mercedes could never take this car to another level, even with, let's say, a chassis change, they would have to then distribute the weight again in a specific way. What makes up the baseline of the car is the suspension, the ride height, and really how the weight is distributed. And then the weight on the Red Bull car is distributed so perfectly. No other car has this. Too much front end was put onto the W14, so they were losing out on the rear. Same thing happened for the Ferrari, loose on the rear. Aston Martin changed up their baseline that they had in the beginning of the year. That was a super solid car. A little bit by changing some upgrades, their rear got loose. McLaren, how they made that big jump up was they waited, they didn't bring anything significant. They changed the floor, which was the base of the car, and that is how they jumped up in performance coming into Austria by changing everything and going with a different baseline. Baseline for the car is optimal in these seasons because it allows for every other upgrade to be revolved around the middle of the car and the underfloor. Aston Martin made a huge jump up in 2022. In 2022, all they focused on was underfloor upgrades. They weren't really bringing too many rear wings, front wings after that huge upgrade in Spain. In 23, if you were to name a team that jumped up the most, it was AlphaTauri. Why did AlphaTauri jump up the most? Well, they focused on the underfloor. 5 different underfloors were brought to the team till they had a better baseline. They could lower the car. They did have the suspension change in the back, but yet again, they found out that more downforce should be generated from the middle of the car rather than the rear wing and the front wing, because before, in the past regulations, it was good to go for those front wing and rear wing upgrades. It's still optimal. Obviously, you want the car to be balanced fully around, but this is something that Red Bull has just been so beautiful at. That is why Adrian Newey even stated, I focused a lot on the suspension. He didn't say why he focused a lot on suspension, but it's because they're able to have that baseline a lot lower than other teams on the grid, giving them another advantage and being able to just be good all around, because that is the key in Formula One. You don't want just low speed like Aston Martin had in the beginning of the year, or just high speed like McLaren and Silverstone. You need a great baseline that is super low, and that is what Red Bull has really just been exceeding at this year, and I expect teams to copy this going into 2024. Already Aston Martin talking about a different baseline on the car. We know Ferrari's going for it. We know Mercedes is going for it. McLaren seem to have found a good car baseline anyways, but they need better balance. So I'll have to see what they go with. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please leave a like, subscribe. It would mean the world, and peace.